Hello again, chess enthusiasts. We have in front of us a problem that requires white to checkmate in 2 moves. Now, as is always the case, we need to find the key move, and of course, as can be seen, there will be a multiplicity of variations in this one because black has a number of replies. But what is very interesting to note about this position is that once you've played the key move, it's then generally the case to say, well, what are we threatening here? Well, what are we threatening after the key move? Of course, we need to know what the key move is, and then we can see what the threat is to black, and he has to parry that threat. Now, when we have a situation where we've played a move, and if black could forego, in this case black, because black is the opposition here, if black could forego moving, he'd be safe. But because he's compelled to move, he's beaten. Now, as has been explained on a number of my videos and shorts, Tutzwang, spelt Zugzwang, is exactly that. It's a German word for compulsion to move. Now, the question arises here, once we play the key move, is there a Tutzwang situation in play? Well, I believe there is. Can you see the key move? It's a mate in 2, so there aren't that many moves required to get to the mate, but like I say, there will be quite a number of variations, so we need to consider all of that. Well, the key move is knight to b7. The idea of this is to cut the black queen off, which otherwise can be a nuisance for interposing. Now, there are 19 replies to this move. When I say there are 19 replies, let's just say, for instance, if this queen moves anywhere along here, including capturing this, that is to be considered one move or one reply because it's moving in the same direction. Similarly, anywhere down here. The exception to that is where, and it happens in the cases of these rooks, where although it can, like here, move anywhere down here, that is not to be considered one reply because in one variation there's one second move that checkmates for white, and in another line there's a different second move for white. So I've individualized them where there is a different second move for white. Where the second move for white is the same throughout, then it is considered 19 replies. But just getting back to what I was saying, what is white threatening here? Tell me that. You need to see what the threat is. And at first I had doubts that knight b7 is the move. It's only when I went through all the variations that I could see that it is. I've analysed it exhaustively, I think. Well, mainly, you'd say the threat really would be to go here. The idea of this being to stop the queen from capturing this bishop. So it gives check. Now many would say, oh, well, that's checkmate. The king can't move anywhere. Well, no, of course, quite right. The bishop does cover this square on the other side. But what I noticed to my horror is that black can interpose this rook here. You see what I mean? So really, that doesn't work. And a line that is rather featured quite a lot here, taking rook f3, is defeated because black can take the bishop. So if anyone can dispute what I'm saying, go ahead and do it. And I'd be happy to hear from you. I don't think there is any threat on the part of white there. So what I'm saying is that if black did not have to move here, there would be no checkmate in 2 moves. Indeed, if white were forced to make a move, say such as this, just for the sake of making a move, it would defeat the mate in 2, but there wouldn't even be a mate in 3 because black can then start check. Moreover, I like to move from one side of the board to another in solving these. If we take this queen away from the C line, putting it here, for instance, then there's definitely no checkmate. You need the queen on the c-line. And if you keep it here, you discover that in certain variations, you need the queen here to cover this square once this rook moves. So there would certainly be no mate in 2, and probably no mate in 3. In fact, given the evenness of the material, as you can see with the captured pieces on either side, there's not a great deal of difference. So I think what I would have to say is that is definitely a tutzwang. So let's look at the replies, and they are as follows. The queen anywhere on the A line, so anywhere down here at all, it doesn't really make any difference. Then, like I was just saying a moment ago, rook f3 does feature in this. You're stopping this rook from interposing because you're whipping it off. You're covering this flight square here, and of course the queen, with being further up the A line, it's not at liberty to capture the bishop. And so all squares are covered there. That is checkmate. So that's variation 1. Variation 2 involves the queen moving anywhere this way. We might as well whip this off to give maximum effect to this. So we take that off. What happens then? Well, quite simply, in capturing your bishop, he has ceded protection of his own bishop, and that is checkmate. Similarly, covering the flight square, and everything else is covered. So neither of those queen moves works along the A line or along the 8th rank. So what about the queen taking the knight? What happens then? Well, let's take it off. See, this is, as we're moving along here, you can clearly see that the only way that white can checkmate in 2 moves is by black committing himself to a certain position. And these are the replies that enable white to checkmate in 2 moves. If he could forego moving, he'd be safe. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. So what do we do here? Well, again, because he's moved away from the A line, it's queen A1 mate, and there's no interposition. The fact that the queen has this diagonal is irrelevant because it's on the wrong coloured square, so that's fine. So those are the queen moves comprehensively dealt with. So what about this bishop? What do we do here? Just take a look at that. Well, clearly if he moves to here or here, let's just say here, doesn't make any difference, we just take it off, and that's an immediate checkmate. There's no doubt about that. So it's all over at that point. There's no interposition at all. On the other hand, should he move this bishop to there, he's self-blocking the d4 flight square to his own king. So what do we do in a situation like that? Well, then we take this knight down here, and we have checkmate again. Like I say, without the bishop there, he'd have the flight square, but he doesn't. So the bishop moves are equally no good. What about the knight? Now this has 5 moves. Just look at them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's take those one by one. Let's take knight a6. Well, again, we don't need to actually prove it because you can see that he's blocked the A line, queen a1 mate. So that's that one nicely out the way. What about knight b5 to there? What do we do in that situation? Take a look at that. Well, with that, we play here. You see, when his knight was on c7, he could interpose. Now that it's here, he can't. And again, this pulls into sharp focus the desirability of blocking this diagonal, because otherwise the queen, black queen that is, couldn't interpose, but that is checkmate. So that doesn't work. What else is there? Well, there's here, knight d5. What happens with that? Well, this is where you can play knight to c6. Ordinarily, you need this knight to cover the square, but he's self-blocking again. And nicely, the knight covers the flight square. So that's okay. That doesn't work. What about knight to e6? How do we reply to that? Now in this case we can't play knight c6 because he'd have a flight square here with the black knight stopping the rook. So what do we answer to knight e6? Well, here we play rook f5, double check, and mate, because remember the bishop covers over this side, and since it's double check, it doesn't matter that the bishop is exposed to the black queen. It doesn't matter that the rook is exposed. The king can't take it, and the king can't move anywhere. And this knight covers here. That's another reason for moving it to b7. And this knight covers here, but the rook would cover it anyway. End of game. So the final knight move is to e8. What do we do there? Any one of the replies that we've made to the other knight moves? Well, yes it is. You remember when he played knight b5, we played queen c5? Well, here we play queen c5 again because there's no attack on the queen and there's no piece that can interpose. So that is equally checkmate. So none of the knight moves works. So what's left? Well, let's have a look at the rook moves. What about rook takes here? Can you see it? Well, it's rook to e6, double check and mate. The knight here covering there and the bishop covering here, and nothing can interpose. You notice with him moving the rook here, taking the pawn, what would previously have been a flight square is covered by the queen. And this harks back to my earlier comment that the fact is, it is a Tutzwang because otherwise you wouldn't have the situation available to you. You wouldn't be able to employ it because it needs the rook to move. It needs him to commit harakiri. In fact, he's forced to commit suicide in order for you to win in 2 moves. So this is where the flight square is covered by the king. Okay, so what about the other rook move with that particular rook? Because don't forget, he can come here. And this again illustrates, because of moving the rook, the queen covers f4. So what do we do there? Well, again, that is rook e6, double check, and mate. If you're going to move this rook while the queen is down here, you need to double check. And the rook, of course, is backed up by the bishop. And the queen covers the flight square and the bishop on the other side of the king. So everything is covered there. So neither of those 2 rook moves works. What about the other rook? Where does that go? Well, if he plays rook f4, what do? We play rook e6 yet again. This is quite a useful move here. It shuts him out completely. And you can get away with it here because he's blocking what would be flight square with this one in the way. So that does work very well. So that is equally checkmate. Just take a look at that. No doubt about that. So that's no good. What about taking it 1 square further? Rook f5. Now you notice rook e6 wouldn't work because he would have the flight square. So what do? Well, on this occasion, we take advantage of doing something that we couldn't do on the previous move. Remember the rook here, it could have interposed, but with the rook here, that is checkmate. Neat, is it not? So there's one final rook move down the F line, and that is to whip this off. So what do we do against that? Well, we play the same. We play queen e3. And that is checkmate. There's no piece that can interpose or capture the white queen. So that's fine. So let's have this back. After knight b7. So what other rook moves are there? Forced to be with this rook. That's there, and there, 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 and there. So what about either here or here? This is to be treated as one move. How do we deal with that? Well, here we can get away with rook f8. That's fine, because with moving the rook away from the f line, he can't interpose. So this is where you shut out the queen attacking the bishop, and that is indisputably checkmate. So that works well. What about the rook taking this pawn? What's the story with that? Rook takes f2. Take a good look at that. Well, here we have our old friend queen e3 again. Nothing to interpose. Checkmate. Right, so that's all the rook moves out the way. What do we have now? Okay, knight b7. We have gone through 17 replies there. Let's try the bishop to g8. What's the point of this? Well, it's just one of his moves, but what he's doing is he's cutting out the queen, protecting the bishop on h8. So here we have to be careful. Don't play the rook down this way because he has the interpositional move of rook f6. You take it. And because the queen is not attacking the white bishop, game over. Fantastic. And nothing can interpose between the bishop and the king, and of course the bishop covers the other side. So that doesn't work. So what's the final move? Can you see the final move? Just take a good look at it. There we are. After knight b7. Well, the final move, of course, is that black has a flat square for his king. I've been on about it long enough, so let's play it there. How do you win this? Just take your time and have a good look at that. Well, the only move to win is to play here. Bearing in mind, like I said earlier, you have to double check while the queen attacks your bishop. He's attacked there, and he's attacked there. So the queen covers the c line, the rook is covering the d line, it's also covering this pawn, the pawn covers here, knight, everything is covered, and he can't interpose anything. Well, he can interpose here, but it's the bishop, it's the double check that mates him. And that is a truly wonderful problem from the 1880s. And it's not yet clear to me, although I'm trying to find out, if it has ever been recognized that this is a Tutswang position, either at its inception or at any point down the years, and I'll update you on this in due course. And always, by all means, let me know what you think about it, and goodbye for now.